Okay, so this is who we are, basically. We're a certification body for the program, and let's go to the next slide. So basically, the webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions, use the chat. We'll share the recording after the event, and you'll take our poll, and you are muted. Next. Yeah, so let me introduce Andrew here, and he can talk about himself, and I'll stay quiet. Andrew?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, apologies to everybody. We've got some technical difficulties our end that we can't get video, so you've only got my voice. But you can see me, that's the guy in the corner there, and I'm the CEO of Cybersec Innovation Partners. We spent a lot of time in the risk compliance and the internet asset world of PKI, public key information, and the area of domain name systems, DNS, which is what Victor kindly mentioned earlier. You can see I won't be egotistic and read through the things that I've done and been responsible for, but you know, we've been pretty active in this world, supporting and helping a number of governments, a number of agencies, including the FBI. And recently, we got a lot of acclaim for working with the Federation, the Federal Aviation Administration in America, whereby they had an outage on the 11th of January, and we helped them because there was some basic internet security issues that needed addressing. And we make no bones about it. We actually say that this could have avoided a digital 9/11, but you know, we can look at that a little bit further down the line. So could we have the next slide, please? What we're going to do today is we're just going to cover a few things, and please, we're not going to go too technical today, but we're just going to cover some high level areas. We can get into the weeds a little bit another time, but we are very much focused on the perimeter defense, which is where the internet junction and the data from a company's meet and get distributed. Think of this as the equivalent of DHL or FedEx delivering packets of physical boxes, etc. In the world of DNS and the internet, this is where we deliver data packets, but the recipient, the sender and the recipient want to have the information shared without being tampered, exactly the same as DHL or FedEx. So we're going to cover a number of things on this, how it works, some history, CISA's emergency directive, how it's abused, and DNS and DNSSEC. We're going to end up with a conclusion, and then it's going to be your chance to answer questions, to pose questions, and hopefully we can answer them. And if it becomes very technical, I'll pass it over to William to answer. This is, I'd like to say thank you very much to Cybersecurity Canada for putting on and hosting this event. We're starting to work closely with the team there, Victor and his team, because look, accreditation is a wonderful thing, and it should be top of everyone's agenda to make sure they've got the correct accreditations. But at the same time, what we are very, very keen to do is to make sure that this isn't just a tick box exercise, that people are practicing good security posture to make sure they have resilience, not just a certificate to do so. But make no bones about it, certificates are very important, and what the guys are doing there at Cybersecurity Canada are absolutely spot on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next slide. Okay, this is a little bit of history here, and after the panic and getting online without video, we're starting to calm down a little bit, so forgive me for rushing. This is really interesting on the history of the internet, because as you can read there, and some of you will be reading already, that APRINET was originally conceived and started in September 1969. It's an interesting thing because in the 50th anniversary, we were being presented with some awards for being one of the top 10 companies in the UK. And nobody knew the actual reality of that event, because it was the day of the 50th anniversary of the first ever email, which was LO. It was supposed to be log in, but the connection dropped, so it was just LO. It became quite a momentous day. The internet went live in 1983. A lot of people might not understand that. And DNS, domain name systems, I will use the acronym more and more, and hopefully people understand what DNS is, and I'll explain more on that soon, was invented by Dr. Paul Mokopetris. And William and I had the pleasure of having an hour with Paul a little bit earlier today to discuss the vulnerabilities around DNS and to look at a number of challenges that face the world, even though it's coming up for being 40 years old. It's an incredible thing that this is still an area that is lacking in understanding, knowledge, and compliance, but nonetheless, that's where we are with it. So we are beating the drum, as that were. In 1995, look, the US Congress legalized e-commerce, which is an incredible thing, because next year, 2023, 2024, it is predicted that $2 will be lost to every $1 spent on the internet. Think about that for one moment. So for every $1 spent on the internet through e-commerce, $2 will be lost to cybercrime. We either start unplugging the internet or we start making it secure. There is no option. It's unsustainable. Business critical in 97, and the cloud was adopted and pushed out in the early 2000s. This is a really interesting point here on the history of the internet. And as much as in 2001, people will be familiar, and we will touch on it in a minute, of the atrocities of 9/11. And the atrocities of 9/11, September the 11th, 2001, came shortly after the cloud and shortly after Jim Gosler, who was heading up the CIA and the Department of Homeland Security, said in his retirement speech in early 2001, either the intelligence community would learn to adapt or they would be eaten alive by the internet. Quite a profound thing to say. And unfortunately, a lot of that's coming true. Content delivery networks, CDNs, you'll hear me mention those a lot of times, actually started also in 2001. Again, think of a content delivery network as the global geographic distribution of data like DHL and FedEx, but for digital content. And there's been a major shift for connectivity of data centers, which are all over the world. And the collection and distribution of data has been outsourced in the main over the last 10, 15 years and picking up pace. You'll see that this week, I believe there is some outcries about the increase in costs of cloud provision by certain parties. And I won't use the term that was used in the report, but it said it's like the mafia holding their customers to ransom. Nonetheless, CDNs have become a very key component of the distribution of data around the world, and that is a very, very important issue. In 2021, when I first wrote about this in 2021 and predicted that cyber losses would be 6 trillion plus, people thought I was crazy. They thought I was absolutely crazy, and it's actually been surpassed in 2022. And the FBI and other leading organizations predict that the total losses and costs and exposure to cybercrime in 2022 actually exceeded 10 trillion. That's an incredible thing. Just to give you some context around that, that's over 10% of the world's GDP. Okay. And obviously in February 2022, the Ukraine suffered an attack, a war by Russia. But in January 2022, they suffered a torrent of cyber attacks against government websites. In 2019, we've come a long way forward now. In 2019, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, i.e. the #1 federal agency for security in America and pretty much the rest of the world, they issued their first ever emergency directive, and M19-1 is all about DNS tampering. The reason this was issued is because in 2018, numerous federal agencies were taken offline for over 33 days because of DNS attacks. Next slide, please. This is an important slide for people to understand who might not, how DNS works. if you imagine you're sat at your laptop or whatever machine you're at today, a PC or whatever, you're typing away and you go onto a website. Everything is internet connected. Unfortunately, a lot of IoT devices have no security, but that's another discussion. So your laptop or PC will go to your local router, then to a server, then a geographic server, and it will keep asking the questions until it gets the answer, i.e. if you type in www.google.com, obviously that will be cached into your system more than often than not, but it will automatically give you that website that you want. These sequence of events are very much determined by who your providers are, where you're located, and the ultimate DNS provision for a server or a supplier. Very important, those little yellow arrows in between, the 4 yellow arrows, they represent where the joins can be. And in the world of technology, we've said this for decades, the weakness is in the joints. Okay, so from one to the other, to the other, this is where you will hear the term man-in-the-middle attack can occur. And by virtue of that, each of those arrows represents a vulnerability and potential exposure if the entire chain of command and request isn't secure. Next slide, please. What we've done in this slide deck is to try and give some examples of real life cases so that, you know, it's not a hypothesis. It's not, oh, we believe this is to be the case. We are giving factual evidence here. And in 2020, December, SolarWinds suffered a cyber attack, which became the world's most notorious cyber attack and the largest. It actually consequently affected 18,000 customers because of the severity of the attack. We wrote a paper for the Senate Intelligence Committee in January 2021, just weeks after the event, and everything we wrote within that paper actually was proven to be the case and true some months after. So let me just talk through each one of these 3 slides, because this is really critical. And funny enough, William and I, in the conversation with Paul today, we discussed this, and a lot of people don't understand DNS in the first place, but they also don't understand that the complexity of DNS and the entire ecosystem of internet websites, that includes domains, subdomains, servers, and DNS, all elements need to be secure. They are totally reliant upon one another. So if we look at the first picture, April the 9th, I didn't get a chance to update this to the April the 13th, but April the 9th is 4 days ago. We can see solarwinds.com has a full secure 18 DNS records. It has secure DNS keys 10 and delegation status 2 secure. All of it's in that lovely turquoise color. If we then look back to several months prior to SolarWinds suffering a cyber attack, April 23, 2020, we can see that it had 5 insecure DNS records and also an insecure delegation status. This is not a good place to be. But more importantly, this is the bit where people are making the error. We can confirm that SolarWinds today, their top level domain is secure, where it touches the internet and sends data, receives and sends data out. Before the attack in December 2020, in April 23, the middle slide shows us that it was not secure, exposed and exploitable. The one on the end, the third one, and you see I've obfuscated, I've redacted the SolarWinds subdomain. We can see that we've got 6 insecure DNS records, we've got insecure delegations, we've got errors, and we've got warnings. The moral of this slide is that just a top level domain being secure is worthless if a subdomain is insecure. Security does not flow down from a top level domain. Insecurity from a subdomain can flow up into a network. This is what we call a backdoor access. And this is through a configuration, error, oversight, and mistake. Next slide, please. We'll get to questions on these afterwards, but this one, you know, we take a certain amount of pride from this one, and I think we should do, because what we've been doing, helping the FBI and other companies agencies and organizations, actually sort of sets us on a bit of a pedestal, in as much that our expertise is shining through. If you don't know, the Federal Aviation Administration on January the 11th, 2023, they took the near unprecedented stance to shut the entire US airspace. They did that for one reason only. They did it because they did not want airplanes to be causing damage and having flights that could cause literally people's lives, because the NOTAM system, which every pilot across the entire world relies upon for safety checks and for flight paths, was compromised. The left-hand picture you'll see, this is the FAAsafety.gov domain and servers related to it. You'll see it's dated the 27th of February 2023. We did not get a captured screenshot on the day of the outage of this particular domain, but nonetheless, we can see that it is riddled with bogus DNS records, bogus DNS keys, bogus delegation status, and also notices of errors and warnings at the bottom. What actually happened is it took the FAA some period of time to action and initiate the changes that we shared with them. The first one they initiated on the same day, the 11th of January, which gave them back control of the servers of the NOTAMs system, enabling them to allow the airspace to open again. You'll see that now, literally, and again, I've not had a chance to update it, but on the 27th of February, only hours later, they actually addressed all of the issues that we'd alerted them to and had a completely clean, secure set of DNS records for the same domain and servers. This is quite a critical thing here, because in years to come, I'm considering writing a fourth book on this, but in years to come, this will be proven to have avoided a potential catastrophe by the actions that were taken, swift actions by the FAA, but on the back of the information that we shared with them. Next slide, please. Here's an email. Again, we take a certain amount of pride on this, because this is an email from the FAA thanking us for bringing it to their attention. They confirmed that they've remediated it, and they're grateful for the support of organizations like ours. So we rarely get this type of thing. So forgive my indulgence to share this with you, but we're pretty proud of that, because we rarely get thanks. We sort of sit in the background doing what we do, debating the importance and the criticality of these things. But so to get this, we were flattered. I should get a framed picture of that, really. Next slide, please.
We have a couple of questions that I'd like to go through quickly. When was DNS first abused that you know of?
Oh, okay. Well, look, the very first abuse, people will know the name. The first abuse of DNS was a virus known as I Love You. So in 2000, the year 2000, I Love You was a virus that went out and caused massive problems to a lot of people and a lot of operations. Interestingly, if you go back to the earlier slide, I don't want you to, but if you think about the earlier slide, in 2000, you know, this is when cloud and other things were starting to be developed and adopted and adapted. So I Love You was the first known DNS attack that actually compromised DNS servers to spread the virus and the bots to actually go from machine to machine. That was the first case that's known. It's important, though, that the agencies decided they've been using DNS for various surveillance methods for a number of years, but at the atrocities of 9/11, you can bet your life that the agencies really started to utilize not only the cloud, not only DNS, but everything in between to capture data so they could avoid another 9/11. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Also, two others quickly. Okay. After SolarWinds, what other major cyber attacks have exploited DNS?
Well, we've got highlighted DNS attacks from 2000, 2008. We've actually got a list of a number of major ones. 2008 was the Dan Kaminsky, late Dan Kaminsky's exposure to the Microsoft named servers within the DNS that he showed Microsoft in 2008. We then had obviously the latest ones for the federal agencies, who then initiated CISA's emergency directive in 2018. And one of the biggest ones to take out most of the United States was the DYN, D-Y-N. I pronounce it DIN, Americans pronounce it DYN. DYN was a DNS provider. They're now owned by Oracle, bought for $600 million within 30 days of the outage. But they suffered a denial of service, a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service through their DNS insecure servers, which is a little bit bizarre because they're a DNS provider. And, you know, I've not got a slide on here, but they actually aren't that secure today, nor Oracle, which is a major concern. And you know, I'm not going to beat up on anyone. Does that help that question?
Yeah, there's another question.
It's constant. Victor, it's a constant because the majority of people don't look after their DNS. They assume that the keyboard that they type away at is secure, so they don't think about what's going on. But I liken it to this for simplicity. When you leave your home to go to work or to go on holiday, you shut your front door. Do you leave the back one open? Of course not. You shouldn't do, because someone's going to walk in the back and take your goods.
Yeah. So one other question. For DNS being insecure, what we recommend, and I'd like you to add to it, but for organizations, we need them to have DNS filtering. So they have an active check. They don't rely or trust their providers, their internet providers, because they don't do any filtering. So we recommend some sort of filtering, either on their firewalls that have some threat intel that's near real time, or some public servers that you can get access to. Some are free, some services aren't. That it will validate the URLs within, you know, well, the process is fast, but as soon as they get reported that it's malicious, they will start blocking the DNS, and then you'll get all kinds of weird errors on your computer. So that's the control we want to see everyone utilizing. But are there any other recommendations?
Victor, is a really interesting one because look, just jumping ahead a little bit on that, what you're saying about DNS filtering makes perfect sense. Absolutely. It protects users and the companies from going on malicious websites. Absolutely spot on. In the UK, the NCSC has recently launched PDNS, which is Protective Domain Name Systems, which in essence, my only reservation with this is, yes, it protects the users, yes, it protects the companies, but it is effectively an authorized and unauthorized listing of websites that have malicious content or are known to be vulnerable or dangerous. If you stop and think about that for a moment, this is an interesting point that you will identify with. Most people will go to the websites that they want to look at, and they may see the padlock in the top left-hand URL address bar. They may see a not secure logo, meaning that the website is not using the up-to-date HTTPS, which is hypertext protocol and secure. It may be using old HTTP. By virtue of that, what it's actually telling you is that that website may be unsecure. It is not encrypting data traffic, and if it captures it, it could be captured in plain text. In a poll and a survey in Australia recently, and poor old Australia taking the brunt of most attacks at the present time, in Australia, they did a poll and over 90% of people still went onto a not secure website. That's quite alarming. Now, people need to be protected from themselves in lots of cases, and you are perfectly right. DNS filtering avoids landing onto malicious websites, known malicious websites, and that filtering will constantly change. We've had a long discussion with the NCSC and Nominet here in the UK about this, and we think it's a good step, but there's a lot more to do. It does not override DNS controls and internal controls, governance, and compliance. This slide
All right.
here, does that help you, Victor? Sorry.
Oh yeah. No, this is great. Go. I'll let you continue on.
This next slide, this just goes to show the simplicity of how DNS tampering and abuse works. If we can see the chap on the left, and it's a chap or a lady, whatever, gender neutral, I don't mind. If we see the person, the user on the left-hand side, they type away in their keyboard, and by default, it goes to DNS. Everything touches DNS. There is no avoiding it. Many years ago, people used to manage their own DNS, but now it's become fashionable for various reasons, not only because of the operating costs to move from OPEX to CAPEX, but also for simplicity and lack of having, server farms, etc. So you've got the big players offering DNS out there. They will have a shared responsibility clause within their contracts with you that say you are responsible as the parent to make sure that this is secure before you actually use it, which goes back to your filtering scenario. But if your DNS isn't secure, you're pretty buggered anyway. So we see that the user on the left goes into, by default, into a DNS set of servers, asking for the questions. The latency on this is milliseconds. It's all done pretty much automatically. But if an attacker notices through their reconnaissance that a DNS position is insecure, like some of the slides we saw earlier for the FAA or the CA, if that's the case, the attacker can simply launch a command and control takeover, denial of service, man in the middle attack, whatever, DNS phishing, DNS poisoning, whatever, and they can redirect that user, totally unbeknown to the user, to a fake website, which is, you could lay your filtering argument over this and say filtering will protect known fake websites against DNS spoofing, 100%. The challenge we have is that is only as real time as somebody forming that listing of the filtering capability. I'm sure you understand that. So that's as easy, and it couldn't be simpler to understand that when you go online, you are assuming your router and the DNS servers that are giving you the connectivity are secure. If they are not, you could end up on what we call an evil twin website. It could look identical, and I could bore the hell out of you how Germany paid 100 million euros in 2 weeks to somebody pretending to be a website claiming COVID support. And it was only 2 weeks later when people started saying, well, I haven't received the money, that the German government realized they'd been paying cyber criminals who were exfiltrating the data, changing the payment details, receiving 100 million euros. Incredible. Next slide, if you would, please. We get people saying, oh, the share price doesn't get affected too much from cyber attacks. And this one is a case in point. And although it's the exception, and one that is dramatic beyond belief, in 2020, December 2020, when SolarWinds suffered a cyber attack and the knock-on effect, they had sold shares, two companies, Thoma Brava and Silver Lakes, the major venture capital companies within SolarWinds. They also had 7 seats at the board. And on the Monday, before the announcement on the Wednesday in December 2020, they decided they would sell $250 million plus of shares. That took the share price just under $45 a share at the time, as you can see. One of the biggest buyers at that time was Canadian pension scheme. You may be aware of that, Victor, I'm unsure. And subsequently, 2 days after that, the announcement was made that SolarWinds had suffered a cyber attack. I won't use the terms that some people have used in that, but nonetheless, you make your own mind up. Those shares today are trading at just over $8. They've lost 85% of their value since the cyber attack only a little while ago. So I can genuinely say to you, if SolarWinds weren't so intrinsically important to the US government, they'd have gone out of business because of the cyber attack. That's a dramatic position, and you know, SolarWinds were a multi-billion-dollar organization. Now they're struggling to survive, but the government can't afford. You've heard the term "too big to fail." This is the situation. There are too many government entities reliant on SolarWinds technology to allow them to fail. Next slide, please. This is an interesting one, and we discussed this with Paul earlier today. DNSSEC was invented back in 2010. It was first used on July the 15th, and DNSSEC effectively just allows you domain name systems secure. And it's a set of rules that allows you to deal with a number of websites and server exposed positions in one particular methodology. And DNSSEC has been very poorly adopted. There are some people that disagree with it. The majority of people agree with it. But you can see the little picture underneath is a more complex version of the one we showed earlier, 2 or 3 slides ago, where DNS attacks just go into the server. This is more complex because DNSSEC is a little bit more complex. But when you write the rules correctly, these can actually be in play for a long period of time. Unlike DNS, which is a living, a breathing, in effect, situation for a digital server, this is something, those rules will actually prevent a lot of the activity of cross-site scripting and other things. DNSSEC, you've also got to have content security policy, and there are a number of things we could go into depth, but I don't think now is the right time. DNSSEC is a very good thing to utilize and to make sure you utilize within your organization. It will save a lot of the aggravation of typical attacks that are known and listed in OWASP's top 10, for example. Next slide, please. This is one we push out to all our clients on a daily basis, and these are the steps that people must adhere to if they want any chance of protecting themselves and having resilience to cyber attacks. Make no bones about this, the cyber attackers have more motivation than the poor guys defending, but some of that's self-inflicted because they're not doing the basics. And I don't wish to be harsh on that, but when we see, and we witness this on a regular basis, when we see websites that are not secure or DNS positions that are insecure, that means the basics aren't being followed. And CISA issued the emergency directive for exactly that reason. But the first 5 steps we say that people should do is 1, educate your organization to understand the importance and criticality of DNS, and of course, PKI, public key infrastructure, which is the digital certificates. These go very much hand in hand. So when you see a website that's not secure, typically, not always, but typically, it means the digital certificate that is ensuring the authentication and encryption of a website's data to and from, it normally means it's expired or it's invalid or is actually issued incorrectly. There is another case in point. If it's an old certificate and the redirection from HTTP isn't to HTTPS, it will also show as not secure, which is how we helped the Canadian government when you guys had a lot of the problems a couple of years ago. We then say to these people, look, it's a little bit of a poison chalice here. If you've got this position, you now identify it and acknowledge it. Either you can deal with it or you need to get some skilled teams in to do it. We mustn't lose sight here, again, without being in any way condescending. If the team that are in place allowed it to happen in the first place, they might not be the best people to remediate. Okay, they've not been looking. I use the old analogy of the film, Don't Look Up. trying to convince someone that they've missed these things is like telling someone they've got an ugly child. It never particularly goes down very well. The third item here is to perform a report on the infrastructure security analysis. We actually call this a research program. We research, we identify. Funny enough, if you look at NIST's sequence of events for their framework, they say first thing to do is to identify. You cannot protect what you don't know about. That's a really important thing. Finally, and William and I could wax lyrical about this, remediate the issues. If you don't remediate them, all you do is you now know. You can't actually use plausible deniability and say we didn't know. You actually know, but you need to address them. That's an important thing. And then finally, DNS, unlike DNSSEC, which you can implement and will have a longevity, DNS and Internet Asset Security will always be requiring ongoing controls and maintenance. Cloudflare, for example, one of the world's largest CDNs, content distribution network organizations, in their small print, they actually say you should check as a parent organization your position on the internet daily. So all your internet assets, your domains, your subdomains, your servers, your DNS positions, it is your responsibility to check these daily. We completely concur with that. And the reason for that is, we all know about pen tests, and pen tests are a great thing. But if you do a pen test every 6 months, that means there's 6 months exposure before you do the next pen test to tell you may have been exposed for 5 months and 30 days. That's not a great position to be in. We also are aware that a lot of pen testing companies don't necessarily fully appreciate or explore DNS and PKI. Okay, there are exceptions to that, but having been doing this for a number of years, we are fully au fait with what DNS checks and what not DNS checks are done. Next slide, please. That chap again, that's honestly me. I'm sorry about the video today. So look, today there are nearly 5 billion users of the internet. It's an incredible thing. So that's roughly, 60%, 70% of the entire population of the world of about 8 billion people. Latency intolerance is mind-blowing, and you will see a number of people in roles at executive level saying, I don't give a toss about whether the thing's secure. I just want people to go on the website and get it immediately. Don't delay it by sending it through a process that may want to check things. So that's a major issue. And that's an intolerance that general public have got, because they will go from one site to another if they can't get what they want very quickly. DNS and content delivery networks are required to make that happen. Okay, they are, as I've said, they are utilized for a number of reasons. One is obviously the effort and time and cost to have server farms to distribute the content geographically, quickly, without the latency issues. And also, this all came about a lot because of Netflix and others. The sex industry actually drove the internet in the early days because it was seen to be very, very useful to stream those things. But when we went into Netflix and other things too, the latency issues needed to be really buttoned down. The way they did that is to have DNS and CDNs geographically located around the world. So we may be using a number of DNS servers and a number of CDNs to do this presentation today. We're oblivious to it. Okay, we are oblivious to it, but we should be checking. But there's a latency issue to do that. The vast majority of organizations have appalling security in these areas. Okay, we see it every single day, and I won't name names here, but they are some of the biggest organizations in the world that are impacting other organizations. And we strongly suggest of one particular one that springs to mind. They've got 20 million insecure servers that are sending tens and tens of billions of emails every single day insecurely. Phishing attacks, we're familiar with the term and the area of phishing. That's where someone gets hold of your email, they change it, they tamper with it, they abuse it, they alter it, and they distribute it. and make changes. We had it with a client recently who spent 5.7 million. They moved 5.7 million only to find the next week that it had been sent to the wrong people because the email had been altered en route. So it's very important. You go back to that DHL, from sender to recipient, you do not want it to be tampered with. That's a really important issue. The consequences of poor cyber hygiene, as we've just seen, not only has SolarWinds lost billions in value, but the brand reputation, the risk, the client, the lawsuits, all of these things are knock-on effects and consequences of poor cyber hygiene. DNS is one major issue. It's not the only issue, but it's the one we focus on, and we call it perimeter security, because going back to the front and back door, if you're sitting indoors or go on holiday or go away for a year and leave the doors open, the chances are someone's going to go in and take your stuff. Add to the fact that we know that the internet is weaponized, and it's a given fact that if you're not secure, it's just a matter of time. Our mission, we stand on a bit of a soapbox here. Our mission is to help the digital world be safer. And I am not, William and I are, I think the polite term is we're in the autumn of our years. We're not youngsters. We're not looking to rape and pillage the market. We're literally trying to say our legacy will be to make the digital world safer, which means working with the Vint Cerfs, the Paul Mockapetruses, and the agencies of the world to do so. That's our mission statement, and that's what we abide by. Next slide, please. I think we're getting very close here to the end. This is a parting thought, and I've used this cartoon a number of times. So if anyone's listening that has seen some of my writings, and I've written over 1,500 reports in this area, as well as published 3 books. This one is unfortunately, this is human nature. This is humanity. Everyone wants a reassuring lie, and they're willing to pay for it and willing to queue for it. But when it comes to an inconvenient truth, as you can see there, there's no takers. And DNS is one of those issues that people will have debates about, they'll push back on. And, I don't want to say ignorance is bliss, but in this case, a lot of the time it is. And you'll see the term, it drives me crazy because I wish I'd have had a patent on it. The word sophisticated comes out all the time, and it was a sophisticated attack, or Medibank had a sophisticated attack, or Optus had one. None of that's true. The word sophisticated was coined by the agencies to give companies who weren't doing their job very well, who had exposed positions and that were then exploited. It gave them a comforting exit and story, a narrative, if you will. And in truth, cyber insurance providers also took pity on people that said it was a sophisticated attack. In lots of cases, these are teenagers, not so much as nation states, but the general attacks can be young teenagers that are finding exposed websites, servers, and DNS positions and just exploiting them. Sometimes they don't even mean to, but by default, they do. Hopefully, I've covered a lot of the areas that people wanted to understand a little bit more about DNS. We are very happy to field questions. We're very happy for the slide deck to be shared, Victor, or for people to email us and ask us more information. Of course, look, William, you let me down. You didn't put a picture of all my books at the end, but we really want to thank Cybersecure Canada. We want to thank everyone for attending and giving us their time. We are here to serve. We are here to make the world safer. Tell us how we can help you.
So thank you very much. It was very informative. I hope everyone thought the same. And we're open to questions. So if anyone has any questions about the DNS or anything about the program, the Cybersecure Canada program, which is the federal certification program, we're here to answer any questions. Otherwise, if no one has any questions, we can let you go. It looks like 9 minutes to the hour, so you can continue your day. but if I don't see any questions yet, but remember, we're here. Our mission statements are very similar. Basically, we want to make sure that everyone uses the internet safely, from corporate to down to the personal. And that's our goal, is to have that. That's why we've undertaken this whole Cybersecure Canada program, and we're working through Canada first, and we'll see if we can get some uptick, in other countries. So
Victor,
I'd like
can I
to thank everyone. Yeah.
Victor, sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt you. I didn't mean to. Can I just add that what if just one takeaway from today for everybody is when they browse on the internet, whether it be their phone or whether it be on a PC, laptop, or whatever, please, 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 everyone become familiar with the URL address bar at the top of the screen, and the padlock should give you some comfort. It doesn't mean you're 100% secure, but it does authenticate the website that you're visiting, as opposed to one that's pretending a spoof, a evil twin website. If it says not secure, please do not enter it. Come off of it and go to an alternative website. We see people doing this all the time, and then 3 weeks later, 5 weeks later, whatever, they get a credit card bill that says, oh, you spent $3,000 in a store that you've never visited, but you got to pay it. And you go, well, hold on, how did that happen? It's only when they trace back that they bought a pair of jeans online or something that never arrived, but the website they went to was a spoof website. They put their credit card details in, game over. They need to change the credit card. They need to change the details. They need to remove the cache of that website. The impact to people of not actually being compos mentis and aware of the activity they take, which again goes back to the earlier comment about the latency intolerance. We need to slow down a little bit because we are rushing and hurtling towards cyber Armageddon if we don't. And people, this picture is so spot on. People are going on not secure websites, putting their details in and expecting the credit card companies or the banks to suffer the losses for purchases that were made to cyber criminals. Much the same as the one I touched on in the German government that gave 100 million euros in 2 weeks to cyber criminals through a spoof website. The damages and costs are trillions of dollars. That's 12 zeros for people that, sometimes don't understand the number of zeros. Millions are 6 zeros, trillions are 12 zeros. That's happening in the main because people aren't taking enough time or lack the discipline and knowledge to do what they need to do. So the next time you do it, just check the padlock before you go on. I'm hoping that everyone goes home or works this afternoon and goes, I'm checking every single website I look at.
Yeah. So we have one last question. How important is it to protect DHCP? It is important. It has to be configured correctly, and it's usually an internal service for, whether it's a home router or an office server. So there are some tools you can use to make sure that the machine belongs to the organization, using, say, MAC addresses to give them an IP so they can join on the network. There are little things that you can do to help protect it, and depending on the organization, it can become critical to make sure that every device on the network is accounted for. So yeah, it is kind of important, but absolutely. I think, yeah. So
Victor, I liken this. Look, I always try and make things simple. You're perfectly right about DCHP. The bottom line on this is this: We sit at our laptop with our keyboard and we assume everything else is in line and secure, which is a major mistake. And you know, unfortunately, the onus is typically on us. Typically,
So we go by the we go by the motto. So,
yeah. Go on.
Yeah, we go by the motto: trust but verify.
Absolutely, I agree 100% with that. If you go back to in the 1960s, when you know that you've got all the original James Bond films and the spy films and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and things, you'll see that when they actually did the phone tapping, they would actually go out to the external phone cabling and put little clips on. Yeah, that's what they used to do. A friend of mine who used to be the top guy, the head of the MI6, he said, Andy, it's so easy today because all we need is someone with an IP address or a laptop or a phone. We can get access to anything because of who we are. Now, if they can do that, think of this. Every time you sit at your laptop, every time you connect to something, if you're not being vigilant of what you're connecting to, so can anyone else see what you're doing. This is where the discipline and vigilance comes in. You can't control the router or the servers. You should be aware of them, especially as a company, because the onus comes back on you and you face class actions if it's wrong. But as a user, please, please, please make sure where you're going, what you're doing, you know, and my goodness, a lot of the adult entertainment world are full of malware. So please be careful if you get involved in that.
Okay. So I got to let everyone go. It's we have now another business meeting to go to. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here, and thank you for joining us and, you know, sharing your wealth of information to a little bit of the information you have. But it is critical, and that's why, you know, the program requires it. So thank you very much, and till next time.
Thank you, Victor.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.